let's take a little look. All right, not a big look, a little look. All right. Let's see here. Writing, layout, and art by John Harper. Man, this guy is a Renaissance man. He is a true creator. Thanks to all of awesome people that work for this stuff, including Strauss, who's awesome, Tony Dowler, who's awesome, Vincent Baker, who's awesome, John LeBoeuf Little, who is awesome, Andrew Gillis, who is awesome, Fred Hicks, who is awesome. Good stuff. McGuay Baker, also awesome. Look at that. It's just like, imagine having these people in your freaking Rolodex, right? Troy Lavallee is Glass Cannon. Okay, I did not know that one. Yeah, Sean Nittner. Yeah, good stuff. Good. Oh, Becca Scott. She is Becca. If you're watching, she's so fine. I know she's married, but all right, here we go. Blades in the Dark, Deep Cuts is a collection of expanded setting elements, alternate mechanics, and techniques for play. The first section is new stuff for the setting. 13 innovations to reflect ongoing industrial age advances, as well as scientific and political initiatives by the Imperial March. Okay, so, kind of maybe taking the timeline further a little bit, which I don't mind. 27 factions, including 15 that were mentioned in Blades but not given full treatment, like the Ciphers, the Railjacks, the Path of Echoes. Which is the Path of Echoes was a major part. I mean, I made it all up because Blades in the Dark doesn't really have a whole lot of detail about anything, which is fine. I actually think that's kind of cool. In fact, one thing that people complain about all the time is like, give us the lore, give us the lore. And I kind of like that they didn't give us the lore, but the Path of Echoes was a major part of my last Blades in the Dark campaign. The Unchained, a group of hulls who have gained their freedom. That's awesome. 100 heritage and background options to give you more choices when making your character, as well as adding more lore about the wider world of the Shattered Isles. And a catalyst, introducing a world-shaking event which expands and alters the setting of the game, along with dark secrets to explore and opportunities for scoundrel explorers. Okay, so a bunch of setting stuff. The second section is a collection of 6 systems for the game. They are all modular, so you can use them or lose them. A modified advancement system, which slows the rate of character and crew advancement, so longer series maintain room for growth even later in the game. This is something we talk about all the time, which is that Blades in the Dark is not good for long-duration campaigns because the characters get too powerful too quickly. Revised harm and trauma systems, which are more flexible and impactful in play. I'd love to see what they talk about here. There's, in my own games, when I use harm, I use persistent harm and I use temporary harm. And then with the downtime rules, I let people just reduce the level of harm on all of their harms by 1. So level 1 harm becomes nothing, it heals. Level 2 harm degrades to level 2, or level 1, level 3 degrades to level 2, etc., etc. So 1s become nothing, 2s become 1, 3 becomes 2. Anyways, with just a single downtime action. That's the way I always did it, but that's a diceless downtime system. Interesting. I didn't really like rolling dice that much in the downtime. I'll be honest with you. I'm kind of excited for it. That's not an area where I want chance. I want that to feel more like a worker placement game. With tweaks to playoff heat, vice, and crew development, and a new action system. Okay. Which overhauls and streamlines the action resolution mechanics to empower players even more and speed up the process of play. Now, I'm very interested in the setting stuff, but I'm going to skip ahead to the systems. All right. Oh, apparently the bookmarks do not work. All right. We're going to go to page 73 then. All right. Ooh. So he added temporary harm, but he did it as level 1. Okay. This module makes harm more flexible and impactful and provides a new way to earn XP. Okay. When your character suffers harm, record on your playbook occurrence level. Harm 1, temporary, a negative effect that goes away naturally over time and does not require treatment for recovery. Bloodied, confused, distracted, intimidated, etc., etc. Now, I used to do this and would call it temporary harm. Now, I could have level 2 temporary harm or even level 3 temporary harm, but it would go away naturally in the fiction. And if it didn't go away in the fiction, it would always go away at the end of the score. So the best example of this that I used to do is like if somebody got like, crushed in the solar plexus and they got the wind knocked out of them. Right, I would actually give that to them as level 3 harm. Right, you're basically incapacitated, but it's only for a few moments, right, until you can catch your breath. So I would call that level 3 harm, the wind knocked out of you, temporary. And if it might shake off after a couple passes of action, but for that time, if you want to act, you're gonna have to push yourself to be able to do anything. Anyways, lasting harm is level 2, severe harm is level 3, and fatal harm is level 4. You have space in your playbook to record 2 instances of level 2 harm and 1 instance of level 3 harm. If you suffer harm at a level that is all instance, it goes up. That's nothing wrong. But you may have unlimited number of level 1 harm conditions. But if you suffer the same condition a second time, bump it up to level 2. If you're tired and become tired again, erase it and take level 2 harm exhausted instead. And if your level 2 harm instances are full, that's okay. Just record another one. It doesn't bump up to level 3. That's a little awkward. All right, but okay, harm levels are no longer tied to specific mechanical penalties. Interesting. So for those of you who don't know, in Blades in the Dark, normally, level 1 harm and level 2 harm basically give you a penalty to your outcomes mechanically. You either get penalties to the number of dice you get to roll, or your the effectiveness of your action is reduced or limited. And then to do level 3, if you have level 3 harm, you basically have to spend stress and push yourself just to be able to act. Instead, he is turning harms into temporary aspect tags. Harm may be invoked by the GM to impede the character, create a problem, or limitation. When you invoke harm as the GM, now Blades in the Dark really didn't have this as an option in the game. Not really. It didn't really have this. I kind of like it. Introduce a bad outcome or new problem. Reduce an action or attribute rating for a roll. Reduce the position effect. When a character's harm is invoked, mark XP. Feel free to remind the GM of your character's harm when you think it might apply. Okay. Is there like a doesn't look like there's a limit to this either. So basically, instead of giving them a hero point or a fate point, you're letting them mark XP. All right. That is a big change, I will admit, and it definitely gives the GM a lot more narrative control, almost like more like what they would have in a Fate game. That Blades in the Dark, traditionally, the GM did not have that as much. So that kind of makes me rephrase, it kind of recontextualizes my understanding, because while you had stress, you didn't really have, stress was a player resource, Will Netters, I'm back. I was just talking about Torchbearer with a friend. Tomorrow is a one-shot. What game are we seeing here? This is a expansion book called Deep Cuts for Blades in the Dark, just released just today, just a few hours ago, by John Harper. So we're just quickly taking a look at some of the mechanics of it. I'm not going to get too much into the detail. All right, if you think the consequence from an invocation of harm is too punishing, or it's something you just don't want to deal with, suggest an alternative impediment and discuss it with the GM, or tough it out. Take 1 stress and draw a line through it. You still have the harm and need to recover it, but it can't be invoked to impede you. All right, so putting again, the player still has that agency, which is interesting. And it does cost you stress in order to be able to pay that out. All right, sometimes it might require an action to remove. Otherwise, level 1 harm is removed in the fiction. If you're intimidated by Bazo Baz, how long does that last? Was it a one-time thing? Does it stick with you for a while? That's for the player to decide. Level 1 harms aren't meant to last forever. After they've been invoked a couple times, or as soon as downtime begins, remove your level 1 harm. So he's basically doing what I did with temporary harm and just sort of co-opting that into the entire level 1 area. And I like that. I like that a lot. If you suffer a mortal wound that isn't instant lethal, you may survive it if someone can treat the wound. The fatal harm remains in your playbook and must be dealt with as a recovery active. Also, record a scar, a permanent injury like a limp, chronic pain, loss of an eye. You may invoke a scar to impede your character and mark XP as if it was basically essentially permanent harm. Okay, so this is really adding basically a lot of fate elements to the game, right? And the ability to sort of treat these harms rather as sort of negative aspects that the GM that don't have any mechanical weight unless the GM invokes them essentially by making it come up, giving you a penalty to a mechanical roll that it would apply, or introducing a narrative complication and bribing you essentially with XP to do so. Looks like there's some changes here to how certain abilities work because the harm system is part of the mechanics of this game, and so, you know, it matters. We are looking at Deep Cuts, which just got released. It's by John Harper, and it is kind of his home rules and updates and optional expansions to Blades in the Dark. This module, so the trauma module, makes the immediate consequence of trauma less severe. Ooh, I like that. I don't like that trauma takes you out. And provides a different way to earn XP. Okay, when you need to mark stress, but all your boxes are marked, gain a trauma condition from your character. Mark one of your trauma boxes, then remove all your stress. Circle a list from your playbook or create your own. Describe your trauma reaction based on the condition. You decide how intense this is. Fantastic. I love it. I didn't like that trauma took you out of the scene or out of the score. I didn't like that. It was the only thing I didn't like about trauma. But now you can invoke them to create a problem or complication, and we mark XP. This replaces. Okay, yeah. So the way it worked is that when you gained a trauma, if it came up during the session, at the end you would be like, "Hey, my trauma caused problem," and I get a mark XP. So this is kind of taking that same idea and just making it to more of an in-game play, compelling type thing. Invoking. They're even using. He's even using the fate language, which is to invoke an aspect. Very cool. When you mark your 4th trauma box, you retire. That's normal. Before that, you can recover trauma. They mentioned this in the core rulebook, so this isn't really an expansion, but they never really provided any sort of details. That work with the GM to create a long-term project to remove one of your conditions and clear a trauma box. All right. Load. All right. Let's see how they changed load. Okay. Before the score, you choose your plan for the operation. Also choose your load style, conspicuous or discrete. So the way it used to be is there was 3 levels of load. There was basically like light, medium, and heavy. And that gave you more load boxes that you could tap into during the score, but it made you more, apparently that you were, toting a bunch of gear. All right. You have 6 boxes of items. You may bring heavy items, anything that requires 2 or more. So one of the things that was always funny was like, you could choose light load, and I think that gave you 3 boxes. But then, so the idea is that you basically look like any person off the street, right? You don't look like you're, you don't have a in D&D terms, you don't have a backpack on, you don't have a heavy suit of armor, you look totally like a person from the street. Now, the disadvantage to that is that you only have 3 boxes to mark stuff with, whereas medium is 5, and I think heavy was 7. But marking something like my full plate of armor, it takes 2 boxes. It's heavy. So you could be like, yeah, I was light load. And you're like, I was wearing my full plate of armor the whole time. And it's like, wait, what? how is that? You pull out your like massive polearm weapon, your gigantic bazooka cannon. And you're like, wait a second. I thought you were dressed in civilian clothes and you didn't look any strange. Where did that come from? So that's what it talks about. Like when we talk about like the dissonance with the fiction. So here, if you're discreet, you don't get to choose heavy items. So it's discrete or conspicuous, but the difference besides just boxes is whether or not you can use those obviously crazily bulky, huge, standing out big weapons or big armor or something like that. If your scoundrel picks something up during a score, you count it as a marked load box. So there's other people like, so what? I can't pick up stuff during the score. If you mark a 5th box when your character becomes conspicuous, even if they were discreet. Okay, I like that. Again, rules lawyers, this never mattered in my game because, if during the course of a score, somebody ends up picking up a massive, 2-handed rifle or something, or a mini cannon or something, I'm not going to be like, oh yeah, you look totally like you're still totally discreet and you're totally still just like look like a civilian. I'm like, no, obviously the fiction is going to reflect the fact that you're carrying around a fucking cannon. If you mark a 7th box, your character becomes encumbered and can no longer run, climb, swim unless they drop, and you can't carry more than 9. Okay. And then just again, some rule changes. All right. Advancement, slowing it down. Instead of using the current XP trackers on your playbook, draw a set of 4 6-segment advancement clocks. Do the same on the crew sheet. Whenever you would mark XP, tick one of these advancement clocks instead. To acquire an advancement, fill a number of advancement clocks as detailed below. When you gain the advancement, clear those clocks. If all of your clocks are filled and you need to mark XP, just make an additional clock to track it. Extra XP is never lost. So, okay. So if you want to get a new special ability from your playbook or crew sheet, you have to basically cash in 2 clocks, which would be 12 XP. And if you want to get the veteran special ability, so for those of you who don't know, when you get a new special ability from your playbook, it's like, taking a feat, basically, in D&D terms. Veteran lets you pick an ability from another class, another playbook. And so it's very powerful. But now here it costs more than just taking one from your own book. I like that. That's nice. A crew upgrade grade per box is 1, and an action or attribute is 1 to 4. So I'm assuming that if you want to get to that 4th dot, so to go from 2 dots to 3 dots, you need 3 clocks. And to go from 3 dots to 4 dots, you need another 4 clocks. That's a lot of XP. So that is a huge change. That is an absolutely huge change, because the real problem with Blades in the Dark from a longevity standpoint comes in when people start getting 3 dots and 4 dots. When you include the fact that people can help, that you can push, right, that you can take the devil's bargain to usually get anywhere from +1 to +2 dice. Once you're rolling 3 or 4 or 5 dice, your chances of rolling a 1, 2, or 3 are almost nothing. It's never 0, but it's damn near close to 0. And you're going to roll a lot of 6s. And you're going to roll a lot more 6s and crits, but you're also going to, never roll a 1, 2, 3. And that means your character is basically never going to fail. They might create complications along the way, but they literally almost can't fail. Now, that's still probably okay. I mean, that's fine for the scoundrels to become kind of badasses at the end. But when that happens, your your game was on life support, because it's very quickly going to become uninteresting, especially since the core element of Blades in the Dark is that your characters are struggling. They're scoundrels, right? And the way that the game ended up working is, I don't know if they probably still have this, but that happened. You would get 3 or 4 dots in an action rating, in several action ratings, long before you would ever get 30 stash or 40 stash. So it almost felt like the end game, potential end game of Blades in the Dark was sort of locked out by the mechanical limitation of just being too good too quick. Anyways, yeah, okay. So that's pretty cool. Oh. Attribute or action. Oh. So finesse, prowl, skirmish, wreck, those are actions. Prowess is an attribute. And one of the tips, one of my Blades in the Dark tips, was I would always tell people, let's take a look at this box here, and let's assume you didn't have this orange one, right? You didn't have this yet. You had 2 in prowl and 1 in skirmish. I used to tell people very quickly, get the first dot in finesse, get the first dot in wreck, because your prowess roll is the total number of dots that are in column 1, and that makes it easier for you to resist, which makes it cheaper. So it's one of the big problems that people have is when they have really shitty attributes. What they're saying is, while taking this first dot in finesse is just 1 rank in finesse, it's the 3rd dot of prowess, and so it still costs 3 full clocks. That is interesting. So you can't abuse that anymore, because if you wanted to get that 4th dot in wreck, it would cost you 4. That's very interesting. Yeah, that's going to really slow the game down a lot. Okay. All right. How does the Deep Cuts book say anything about landing gear? Well, I don't know. We'll see what they do. There is a revised action system, so we'll look into that. All right. This makes downtime activities diceless and details. It changes details. Okay. First, Each cohort heals 1 level horn. These are like your NPC allies, basically. Cohorts are what those are. Then resolve fallout, payoff, entanglements, development, and heat and hold. Okay. So fallout. So normally, right, at the end of a score, we sort of figure out how much, what happened, right? Like, usually what bad stuff happened. What was the fallout from your score? If you left a trail of dead bodies and you blew up the headquarters of your rival, of a rival gang, there's going to be a lot of consequences as well as that. So we assess the fallout from the score in the form of faction status changes. In other words, if we, declared war on a enemy faction, we might go from like -1 to -3, and the amount of heat gained. So adjust the crew's status. Okay, so this gives us a table for status changing. So if the score hurt them, -1. If the score was a major problem for the faction, -2. Set the status to -3 if the crew initiated war with a faction. And by the way, just playing this faction game, you don't have to pick every faction in the fucking book. Just pick 3 to 7. You can start off with 3 and then expand it to 5 and then like 7. I think 7 is like the max you would ever really want to do. Just considering how factions are affected by what the group decides to do, and then just ticking up the status or ticking it down is enough to create a completely vibrant, sandboxy Duskfall. It's pretty cool. All right, so base heat. So before, heat was pretty much entirely based off of how low or high profile was your crime. This gives you more heat if your crew is a higher tier. What it basically means is, as your crew gets more renowned, right? When the crew tier is basically what level is your gang. So when you're starting off the game, you're tier 0. So nobody notices when you do crime because you're nobodies. But once you're like the gang of Crowsfoot, after you're well known, you're the people who took out the lamplighters and you're the people who took out the red sashes, right? Or the lamp blacks or whatever they're called. Then suddenly when you go and do any sort of crime, it's a lot harder to cover that up, Yeah, high-level crooks get high-level cops. So this is a great change. But also, it's great because it means as your crew becomes, quote-unquote, higher level, it's harder to go incognito and more problems are going to come up for you. And it's going to be harder for you to avoid the fallout from it. You don't have that power of anonymity anymore. Death, much higher. This used to be 3, now it's, or 2 or 3, now it's 4. 2 or 4 for witnesses, chaos. So it sounds like they're doing a lot more. So normally this would be a shitload of heat. I mean, I don't know if they changed the heat chart, but that's a lot of heat. So it looks like they want to make heat bigger. So after you're done, payoff. Oh, yes. This is nice. So one of the constant complaints that happens a lot in this game is it's hard to get coin. One of the things I've always done in my Blades in the Dark games is I always gave out a lot of coin. And I would also let like my group, like I would let them get stash, not coin, but I would let them get stash from just like their ongoing criminal activities like the rest of their gang was doing. And you can convert stash into coin. But a lot of people, I've seen many people say that the group they didn't give enough coin. So you get 1 coin per PC plus coin equal to the target's tier times 3. So if you go up against a high tier, tier 3, you're going to get 9 bonus coin plus 1 coin. Everybody gets 1 plus 9. That's pretty cool. So you get kind of rewarded for taking on a higher tier. Plus you get 1 rep for every 2 heat. Oh, that's cool. It ties heat to rep. That's awesome. So, if, in other words, if you did super low profile and nobody knew about it and you didn't generate any heat, right? It's clandestine, then why would your reputation go up, right? Take plus 4 coin if you seize a load of cash. Very valuable stolen items can be fenced for 2 to 8 coin, but you take 1 heat for every 4 value. Oh, this is great. This is fantastic. It's a way to put more money into the hands of the party, which is a good thing. Mostly because a lot of people get frustrated with like, oh, I only get 2 downtime actions. Well, but the truth is that's true, but you can buy an extra downtime action for 1 coin or 1 rep. And nobody really likes to lower their rep. So giving the players more coin is giving them this interesting choice. Now they have this fun resource that they can use to, invest in their stash and try to, save for the retirement, so to speak, or they can spend that coin, more than likely, because they're scoundrels, right? So you kind of get a lot of money, spend a lot of money, right? And that gives you ability to make a lot more downtime actions, which is really, really cool. And if you're tier 2 or lower, you have to pay a tithe to your ward boss. Yep, okay, equal to 1 coin. Yeah, that's kind of still the same. Let's see, you can, in addition to the crew's vaults and the scoundrel stashes, so the crew's vault is like a holding place for the extra money, and your stash is like where you convert coin into non-liquid assets. You can deposit coin in a bank. All right, so this is just a way that you can store it, because now that you're getting all this coin, by default scoundrels really can't hold that much coin, so this kind of gives you a way to maybe be able to store more coin, but it introduces the narrative problem of maybe somebody robs you. All right, if the crew's heat is 6+, or when the fiction demands, nice little addition there, that wasn't in the core book, the GM brings an entanglement into play. When the crew gains a wanted level, mark crew XP. Nice. So again, when something bad happens to you, here's an XP, don't feel as bad about it. And pick blue coats as the entanglement. All right. Severe beatings. I love it. And you can still bribe off your blue coats, and we still have devilry, favor, flipped, rascals. Okay, so that's cool. Instead of spending a lump sum of coin to rise in tier, you invest in crew upgrades over time to improve. These cost coin instead of crew advances. Okay, interesting. Okay. All right, cohorts don't cost coin, they cost advances because it requires time, not money. All right, to advance your crew tier, you need to have a rep track is full, including reduction from turf. You have a stronghold. That's a new thing. On your current, stronghold versus weak hold. Yeah, okay, that's the same thing. Okay, strong versus weak. And you possess right now. Okay, nothing's really that different here. You do need a lot more upgrades to get your tier up. So, it's also nice that they make you have to have cohorts. I like that. It never, the whole idea here is you are becoming the leaders of a criminal organization. And if you don't have cohorts, it's just the party. And I think the faction play, having the cohorts, is a fun part of Blades in the Dark. And as your cohorts can cause a lot of trouble for you, and they can also be a great resource for you. So it's good stuff. You can bribe people's status, and then all right. That's all okay. At the beginning of the scoundrel phase, for each character, restore your armor and special armor. Remove all level 1 harm. If you have a safe place to rest, add 1 tick to your healing clock. The rest of downtime consists of vice and activities. Each player can do these in any order. Each pursuit. Look at that. They'd made... John, you're so smart. Vice no longer takes an action. It takes coin. Now, I've said before that players should not be in a rush to clear all their stress. That's fair. And because, again, but the fact of the matter is, if your stress level's high, you're going to want to spend one of your things on Vice. So now you can just do it for 1 coin. If your stress level was 6 or more, you overindulge. Your character suffers a complication depending on your role on the table below. Interesting. So they got rid of the roll. So Vice just, so your Vice just clears your stress out completely. And it's only if you let your stress level get to 6 or more that you overindulge. And then you make a roll and we see what happens. And only if you roll a 6 do you get wasted and cost you a downtime activity. But you can also choose to be lost to your Vice instead of overindulging. And then you have to play a different character until this one returns. This is a very big change to the game. I think YouTube moderated this one, GM Scott, but it came through on my other app. Interesting. This is probably the biggest change to the whole game. I'd have to really think about this. Yeah. This is very different. Okay. This is one of my favorite ones, by the way. This from the core game. You may go into debt with the provider if they agree. Note the initial coin you owe. Make a forced segment. Okay, so this is just like a rules for like, hey, if you owe money and you don't have money, you can go into debt. And it kind of like, again, I used to do this anyways. Like I think a lot of GMs did. But so I mean, again, John basically said like this is best practices, and I'm sure some of this is stuff that he just naturally came up with, and is sort of just giving you this advice as well. All right, so now Vice isn't one of them, so we can still. Okay. We can acquire, we can recover, we can train, and we can work. If you have level 3 harm, you must use at least 1 to recover. Each scoundrel may prefer 2 free activities, and additional ones still cost 1 coin and 1 rep. But again, in my experience from those tier rules, you'll probably have access to more coin. I mean, think about it this way. Let's say you're a tier. Hey, tip. What's up, Jim Scott?
GM Scott tipped $5. It seems like much of this could apply directly to SNV, but I have 0 experience running or playing Bit or SNV.
Oh,
what are your thoughts?
Yeah. This absolutely could apply to Scum and Villainy. I mean, Scum and Villainy is, got a couple different rules, but most of the stuff that this is addressing would also work in Scum and Villainy. I don't necessarily, I mean, I'm not trying to say that they're better. I still need to wrap my head around it. But, I know we were just talking about stress and vice and stuff the other day, GM Scott. So this vice rule here change really changes the tone on stress, because now, I mean, spending a coin is not nothing. But remember, every score, you're going to get 1 coin at least. So, and you could even potentially go into debt. So this means that now you don't really have to make that hard of a decision. I mean, it's still a decision and it's still a resource cost. It's not free. But what this is interesting is if you're playing a mission, the default assumption now is probably going to be that you're going to clear your stress. I mean, but what's interesting about this now is if somebody's at 3 stress or 4 stress or something like that, or they might spend some more stress. But now if you're at 5 stress and if you spend more stress, you're going to go to 6. Once you're at 6, you're going to want to clear your stress because you're basically maxed out. But that is going to automatically cause either overindulgence or getting lost. So that puts more of the control about, do you want to do this in the hands of the player. Whereas before, overindulgence was random and it could sometimes feel punishing. This I think is designed to remove that. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is a thing. But I think some of this stuff could work here really well. All right. So acquire. Right, same thing. You can acquire temporary items, services, vehicles, crew cohorts for the crew. Yep. Make a 4-segment supply clock for the acquisition to be teched each time. Pay 1 coin for every level. Pay plus 1 coin. Okay, so now you have to buy it. All right, that's cool. So before, this was a check and it was weird and no one ever used it. I'll be honest with you, acquire was like the least used thing ever. Now you get a 4-segment, so you can use it multiple times. And you can actually get a decent quality thing, because the quality sucked because of the way that the rule worked. It was always just shit unless you were good, and then why would you need somebody else's quality? Play 1. So this is good. This is nice. And the whole crew gets access to this. Fantastic. Yep. You may acquire a personal item in the same manner, comparing its quality to your lifestyle rating. Okay. Nice. Supply clocks can be useful for a lot of applications, such as a stockpile of illicit products for a hawker crew to distribute. And we basically did that when my last Blaze in the Dark crew campaign was a group of hawkers who sold drugs. So they made the drugs and then they sold them as well. So they were the maker. It was basically Breaking Bad, the Blaze in the Dark version. So very cool. And you can use it for dwindling positions or use it for favor. I mean, the idea is that these ideas of clocks are very usable otherwise. All right. When you recover in a safe location, before you had this bullshit healing clock and you had to roll on it. So not only was it like a clock, but you had to roll on it. And then if you didn't roll well enough, you didn't get a lot of ticks. And then if you took any damage, your clock reset. All right. When you recover in a safe location, you gain ticks on your healing clock equal to your crew's tier +1. Automatically. No roll. When your healing clock fills, reduce each instance of harm you have by 1 level. When you remove all harm, clear your healing clock. If you engage the services of a physician, they remove an instance of harm with a level to equal to or less than their quality. Got it. For each coin you pay, increase their quality by 1 for more extensive care. So basically you can pay. But you can now go to the hospital. Use this activity to stay in a private hospital. There are no public hospitals. Remove all of your harm and choose 1 heat, 2 coin, or 3 coin. Nice. So this is them trying to basically say, if you're willing to pay, we can remove all your harm. But it's going to cost you. So this gives the players more ability to sort of instantly recover. And I'll be honest with you, when we played Scum and Villainy, I think that my players really did struggle with that. You know, that's how I ended up. I didn't change the vice rules. Actually, that's not true. I did change the vice rules. I made it so that if you were rolling 2 dice for your vice, I let you pick which die you were going to use, right? No, overindulgence is not random, Torin, according to these rules. Instead, what happens is random, Torin. So after let's imagine the heist was over, right? The score is over. We have 5 stress. So we spend 1 coin, we clear all of our stress, and if our stress level was 6 or more, we overindulge. Our stress was 5, so we don't overindulge. If our stress was 4, we don't overindulge. If our stress was 3, we don't overindulge. Now, if our stress was like 1 or 2, are we really going to waste a coin just to cure 1 or 2 stress? Maybe, but we're not really getting the most bang for our buck, right? So when you're on a score, if you let your stress get up to 6 or more, then you know that when you do go to cure it with a vice, with a coin, you're going to overindulge. And then we roll on this table. So the outcome is random, but whether or not you are going to overindulge used to be like, because you didn't know how much stress you were going to cure. And if you cured more stress than you had, that's when you overindulged. This basically says if you're at 5 or less stress when you indulge your vice, it does not overindulge. If you're at 6 or more stress, then you automatically overindulge. And what happens is random. So, oh, absolutely. Absolutely, GM Scott. It's just giving you more options here. And then use this activity, spend XP to get an advance. Oh, you don't advance instantly as in standard blades. Interesting. So train used to let you mark XP. That's interesting. So it doesn't do that anymore. So this all tied into the whole, this thing is slowed down. Interesting. And you don't advance instantaneously. You have to use a downtime action, and you have to describe a training montage. You can acquire an instructor if you don't already have one. You can also choose this activity to act as an instructor in an area of your expertise. Okay, so you, interesting. This is better. Training was very, if you had, don't get me wrong, I had good players, and by the most part, they would take, they'd acquire assets and work on long-term projects and stuff. But you always had the people who just go, I just want to train. Train. All right. Work. Awesome. Accomplish a simple project or work on a side job to earn 1 quick coin. You ask your GM if you could charge more from your work, especially if you work for a high. Yes, I did this anyways. I did this all the time. Like when we were playing Scum and Villainy, where you use cred instead of coin. Like if, like the pilot, like between big jobs, right? Like the pilot might be like, hey, I don't really need to use my downtime action for anything. Like, can I just basically go Uber, like the equivalent of like, can I Uber, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. You can, I'll be like, yeah, you earn, you can earn 2 cred. And he'd be like, cool, and he would just go and do this kind of like side hustle. When you're 9 to 5, when you're not doing crime. For a long-term project, make it an 8-segment clock. When you spend activity, mark number of talks equal to your action rating. Add +1 tick if you have a workshop or other special advantages. Elaborate projects still require multiple blocks to complete. So this basically just says long-term projects are always 8, which is fine. It's kind of what I usually used anyways. And if something really needs to be complex, then you make it 2 clocks, and then that's 16. It's weird that I guess it's just like, it's unnecessary mental unburden. Should this be a 6? Should this be a 10? Should this be I like that there seems to be sort of a, well, I guess there was 1 6, but a lot of things now seem to be 4 or 8 clocks. Players always tried to cheat the train. Yes, I mean I always had one player that would always try to cheese the train. And yes, Derek, the way they would do it is by taking the crew perk to get the bonus XP and then blah, 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 blah. Here we go. Training upgrades. So this is what we were talking about. This is what Derek Rawlings was just talking about. So if you get the training upgrade, you always have access to a veteran instructor, quality rating 3 in that area of expertise. Mastery gives you a quality 4 instructor and unlocks rating 4 actions. When you advance with one of these instructors, mark crew XP. Okay, so basically it lets you train where you otherwise wouldn't. Otherwise, you're going to have to find the instructor. It gives you a quality rating 3 and then a quality rating 4, and still unlocks the 4th level. And when you take an advancement, you get to mark experience points for the crew. So that's fine. By the way, another example here of them giving you more coins. So vaults, which is an upgrade that you can get for your crew, right? You know, bigger, better vaults, bigger, better safes. They're saying now they can hold 8 coins. The second can hold 12. So they want you to have more money now, which makes sense. All right. This is the last thing. Action. This module overhauls the action system of the game, aka the core heart of the game, to make it faster or more flexible by introducing the threat roll, which replaces the action roll and modifies Devil's Bargain, resistance gathering information, and teamwork. This is basically a fucking rewrite of the game. Holy shit. Well, before I go into this, I'm trying to think, what would he have done? So just from that description here, I'm just trying to figure out what he did and why he did it. Huh. All right. All right, John, I'm ready to be impressed. Oh, you know what? This whole time, I've been just so unprofessional. I've been over here. We've been in the PDF, and I have not had my blue screen or my green screen up. Oh, look at me. I'm terrible. All right, I'm ready for this. He made it 5e compatible. Yes. John Harper decided he finally needed to make a lot of money. Okay, overview.
GM Scott tipped $10. Cheers. Glad I didn't tip for a first look.
We're here anyways, GM Scott, buddy. Is this stream going all the way to 2 a.m. number 2? Proxy Bean, you know what? We'll find out. If people are here and they're asking interesting questions and we're having a good conversation, then yeah, we'll hang out. If everybody says I'm tired, I'm going to bed, and there's nobody left, yeah, sure. There's no fixed end date. How about we put that? All right. All right. The threat roll is an evolution of the common risky standard action roll. Okay. So, right, default, we have position and effect. We have controlled, risky, desperate, and then we have the level of the effect, right? We can have limited effect, standard effect, or great effect. It emphasizes how the scoundrels avoid the dangers they face during a score, rather than focusing on the success or failure of their actions. Okay, so let's recontextualize this. So the idea here now is when you go on a score, you're going to be you're going to be faced with a series of dangers and challenges. This is kind of recontextualizing the action roll. And instead of getting like, did you succeed? Did you fail? Did you succeed or fail? It's more of like, you got past the danger, right? Because it emphasizes how you avoid the danger you face the score. So it kind of takes this idea, completely departing from this idea of binary success fail. I mean, obviously, Blades of the Dark had 4 5s, which was this idea of the thing. But now it removes that context. And it says, your success, well, we'll see. All right. When you make a threat roll, the GM describes a bad consequence that's about to happen, and you take action to avoid it. This way, everyone... All right, if you watch this channel, I talk about this all the time, where I talk about letting the danger loom over the players, right? I even talk about sometimes how I think it's more interesting to roll the damage roll in D&D, like Pathfinder, D&D, rolling the damage roll first, so everybody knows, like, oh, this is a big hit. this is 12 damage. That's going to knock my character unconscious. And giving the players the ability to say, like, okay, so what do you want to do about it? So I love this. This is I think this is much cooler. So I describe a bad consequence. That way everyone, the GM describes a bad consequence that's about to happen, and you take action to avoid it. And Brayflox says, so it does cover landing gear then. Brayflox, it does cover landing gear. That's absolutely right. Derek, Mr. Rawlings says, get ready for this. I'm glad Derek is sitting down. Okay. I'm not claiming it was me that got this first look come up, but I'm going to revel in feeling powerful because it's happening. Well, yeah, I mean, listen. It was a group communal effort, but it also didn't take too much to push me to buy this because, whatever. All right, I'm almost done with this pour. It's my last pour of the night. After this, it's just water. All right, that's fair enough. Again, I could dive right into the mechanics, but I'm trying to figure out, like, how is this going to make the game feel differently, right? Like, how is this going to can recontextualize things? Okay. When you make a threat roll, the GM describes a bad consequence that's about to happen, and you take action to avoid it. This way, everyone knows the possible outcome before the roll. You don't have to create a new complication because someone rolled a 4-5. The risk reward is established up front. Now, we've talked about this before on this channel, and I have said that a lot of times people get into trouble because they make someone roll, and then they roll a 1, 2, or 3, or a 4-5, and people go, oh, I don't know what happened to you. And then people go, well, if I had known that was going to happen to me, I would have done something different. And we always said you should very clearly establish what is at risk for this event. And interestingly, additionally, this is what caused the landing gear debacle. It was that mixed expectations. Now, to be completely fair, though, when a bad consequence did happen, the players could still resist it. So we'll see how this changes. Frosty, take care, buddy. Have fun in the non-daylight savings time tomorrow. Thanks for stopping by, Frosty. The day that we start talking about whatever it's Chronicles Darkness or whatever, that'll be a hell of a day, Mr. Williams. Okay, sorry. So anyways, everyone gets very clearly communicated. This is what could happen if you fail or roll low. To get a bonus die, you can suggest an additional threat. This is similar to how Devil's Bargain works in Standard Blades, gaining a bonus by getting into more trouble. After you make the roll, you assign a die result to each threat. So if you roll one good result, you get to choose which one to avoid and which one to suffer. Ooh, putting them on the cross, making them make tough choices. You roll a 6 and a 3 on a Devil's Bargain. Which one do you put the 6 to? There's 2 different threats now. Interesting. Okay. Position and effect are assumed to be risky standard for threat rolls. You only need to evaluate other positions or effect levels as an option in special cases. Okay, so by default, the threat roll is always risky standard. So does this mean we're getting rid of position and effect? Okay. In this module, a Devil's Bargain can be made in any situation, not just when a player is making a roll. The GM can offer a player a bargain to achieve a goal by proposing a cost to pay, like coin, heat, or stress, or by introducing a threat the scoundrel must face. Again, this is basically giving the GM the ability to sort of, bribe you, right? With a threat. The push mechanic and resistance roll are now combined. Okay, so push yourself, by the way, lets you either add an additional die, or you can push for effect and push for effect, or you can, and resistance roll lets you avoid the consequences. Okay. When you push yourself, you make an attribute roll and suffer 0 to 3 stress depending on the result. You can do this to reduce the consequences from a threat, even after a roll, increase the effect of an action, or activate a special ability. Okay. So pushing yourself used to just be a flat stress cost. Now there's a roll involved. It feels like that's extra rolling. Because now, like, if we're pushing ourselves before we make a, so now we're making a threat roll and then we're making a attribute roll. I don't know. I don't know that I like rolling twice. I mean, if a resistance roll was twice too, but pushing yourself is kind of weird. I don't know. When you face a negative consequence from a dangerous opponent, so that was just the introduction to the rule. So here's the actual rule. When you face a negative consequence from a dangerous opponent or challenging situation, make a threat roll to see if you can avoid it. To make a threat roll, roll 1 die for each dot in the action you're using plus any bonus die you have. Take the highest result. 6, you avoid the threat. 4 to 5, peril. Suffer a reduced consequence or push yourself to avoid the threat. 1 to 3. Threat. You suffer the consequence. If you push yourself, reduce the consequence. If you're facing multiple threats at once, add 1 die to your pool for every additional threat. Okay. Then assign a die result to each one. So Oscar Skurlock is dragging a vengeful ghost into a spirit bottle with his lightning hook. The GM describes 2 threats. Electroplasmic energy backlash from the ghost, which is threatening harm too, and getting attention from the spirit wardens, 2 ticks on their alert clock. Oscar rolls 4 dice. They have 3 dice in their attune action, and they have 1 die additional because they're facing 2 threats. They get a 6, 4, 4, 2. They assign the 6 to the energy backlash effect, and they avoid it completely. And he assigns a 4 to the spirit warden threat. So that means we suffer a reduced consequence or push ourselves. So he suffers a reduced consequence instead of 2 ticks, 1 tick, or they may push themselves to avoid it entirely. Okay. To initiate a threat roll, the GM describes a bad consequence that's about to happen, and you narrate your scoundrel's response. Malira suddenly draws her blade in the blink of an eye. She might cut you down before you can react. I lunge forward as she draws and try to wrestle her to the floor before she can get her sword out. If your scoundrel's action initiates the threat, the GM first describes your effect and then defines the possible bad consequence so you know that the risk reward before you roll. So you sneak into the manor through the skylight, but you might draw the attention of the guards. You search the office to find the hidden files, but the servants might catch you in the act. You disable the complicated Sparkcraft alarm, but you might break your tinkering tools. You pummel the blue coat and knock him out. But during the first fight, you might take a bad hit. Based on the description of your scoundrel's response to the threat, the GM proposes an action for the roll. If it doesn't fit your idea, describe the action in more detail. If your group can't agree, the player has the final call on which action rating to roll. In some cases, you might use other ratings, such as a crew tier or lifestyle. The GM can add additional threats depending on the situation, including threats from the environment, NPC strength, or supernatural effects. Additional threats essentially act as a bonus dice to your roll. You have to assign a result to them, so you're in more danger, but by adding more dice, you're more likely to avoid any single threat. If you're facing a really bad consequence, suggest possible additional threats to the DM just to increase your dice pool. Okay, so that's interesting. There's a mechanic there, right? If you need more dice, you can just add a bunch of threats. That way you can take the minor ones, but make sure you have a 6 to get rid of the bad one. When you suffer a consequence, you can choose to push yourself. We used to just call this the resistance roll, to avoid it or reduce it. When you push yourself, you may roll using an attribute that can correspond to the type of consequences, just like a resistance roll in Standard Blades. Except now, in the resistance roll used to be 0 to technically it was 0 to 6. The old resistance roll was 0 to 6 stress, which is 0 to 5 stress. It was a lot. Now the most you can take is 3. And oftentimes you're going to be taking like 2 or 1. So now it is less. It costs less stress, probably most of the time, to resist by pushing yourself. You can even ask the GM what the reduced consequence will be before you make the commit to roll. All right. Let's see here. When a consequence is like a numerical, like gaining heat or ticking a clock. So as a suggestion to our GMs out there, make sure that, if you're going to gain heat or tick a clock, you always make it like 2, because that way if it gets reduced, you can just say, and it's just 1. So reducing consequence simply means lowering the cost. But if it's a narrative threat, in other words, it's a qualitative, not a quantitative threat that is going to happen, requires some nuance to interpret what that means, right? This comes with practice, but the table of effect and consequences on page 97 will help you get started. So basically, if like the idea is like, if it's not numerical, instead you're like, she'll never trust you again. That's the consequence. And you're like, okay, can I reduce the effect of it? And it's like, all right, what does that mean? It's like, okay, how about this? She's just really mad at you. And so you kind of have to be a little bit more nuanced here. Oh, it keeps going here. Okay. Gaining edge. When you roll more than 1 6, you gain an edge. So before, this used to be a critical success. But remember, before we were like focused on what our characters were doing. Now we're just focused on avoiding the consequence. Because remember, if we get a 6, we just do the thing that we just avoid the threat. So if we roll a double 6, you gain an edge, which represents a spark of luck or tenacity. You can spend the edge right away to add greater effect to your action, or you can carry it forward to use as a bonus die on your future roll. Wow, this really sounds like Boost from Fate. If you're in a position to help a teammate, you can spend an edge on their roll. Any remaining edge you have is lost when downtime starts. Most of the time, a standard threat roll is all you need to resolve a dangerous situation. How there's a few special cases that might tweak the mechanic. Controlled position. If a scoundrel is ever in a position where there's no impeding danger, don't call for a threat roll. Just describe what they're able to accomplish without taking a risk or paying a cost. If they want to achieve more, they can make a devil's bargain to do it. If you're in a desperate position, if you're outnumbered, outclassed, or badly impaired, you need to make a desperate roll to avoid the threat. A desperate roll is all or nothing. 6 is a success, but a 5 or less is a threat result. You suffer the consequence. Interesting. And you still get to mark XP when you make a desperate roll. I don't know how I feel about this. I actually really don't know how I feel about this. Fictional positioning, character abilities can mitigate desperate scoundrels. If scoundrel has fictional positioning and character abilities can mitigate desperate threats. If a scoundrel has a rifle and time to fire and reload before the 3 enforcer can reach him, or if they're not to be trifled with, facing 3 enemies at once wouldn't be desperate. It's just a standard threat roll. When you call for a desperate roll, ask the player if they want to carry on with their course of action or try a different way. A clever flashback, a cunning maneuver, or help from a teammate might be enough to improve their position. Sometimes it might make sense to make an attribute rating for a threat roll. You can roll tier or lifestyle rating. A threat roll usually just resolves the consequences of a threat. It doesn't bear on the effect of the scoundrel's own action. However, sometimes the success of an action seems unlikely or especially difficult. In this case, the GM can introduce the threat of failure. So again, this recontextualizes it and basically says you always succeed because you're a scoundrel. The question is, will you avoid the threat? Right? That's what it's basically saying. Like it takes the old paradigm and shifts it to the default assumption is that your character is going to succeed at what they're doing. The question is, will they avoid the consequences of the threat? Right? There's got to be something that's opposing you. There's got to be something that's could be a problem for you. There's got to be something that is in your way, a dilemma. Otherwise, you'd be in a controlled position. And as the game says, we don't have to roll. You can just get what you want and it's done, right? It removes that threat. However, if something's really difficult, we essentially still want to see if your character actually succeeds. In other words, we could still remove, or rather, we can still have this idea, will our character succeed? But instead, the threat is failure, right? But otherwise, we don't assume that the threat is failure. The threat is, the guards notice you, or the guards, bust in and notice you, or the electroplasmic trap goes off, or whatever. But the idea of, is my character going to be able to, break into the safe? Yes. Like we are removing this idea that you won't break into the safe. You're a scoundrel, you're going to accomplish it, but can you avoid the threat? But if we feel like that success isn't particularly likely, or if it's really difficult, we can introduce this idea of, but maybe you fail. If you assign a 4 or 5 to a failure threat, your character's action has reduced effect or otherwise doesn't go as you hoped. And on a 1 to 3, the action fails. You can push yourself to improve the outcome as usual. You know. So this was example I was going to give was like, you know, the long range sniper shot. And that's literally the first, you know, because that came up in my campaign. This is a very long shot against a very tiny target. You're not in danger, right? You're hundreds of yards away, well ensconced in a, you know, clock watchtower. But I'm adding the threat of failure. You might miss. And since you're no kind of sharpshooter, I think it's a desperate roll too. Interesting. Damn, I got a 4. Now remember, in this new world, on a desperate roll, only a 6 succeeds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the threat comes true. In this case, the threat is failure. You missed. So they rolled a 4, which means they missed. So if I push myself to reduce the consequence, what happens? Let's say you managed to land the shot, but not as well as you hoped. You hit him in the arm, not the chest. Okay, I'll do it. This bastard doesn't get away scot-free. Interesting. 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 Now this is a deep cut. I mean, I'm sorry if you're not following. I mean, this is like some serious like kung fu tai chi on the whole paradigm of Blades in the Dark. This is very interesting, and I apologize if you're not super well versed in Blades in the Dark. This might not make any sense to you, but it does feel like there's a lot more steps. It does feel slower. It does feel slower. Rolling for the push introduces reintroduces uncertainty around stress and overindulging. Nate, that is a good point. That is a great point, because when I was talking before about how, well, you'll just stop spending stress once you get to 5, because stress spends used to be, right, defined values. I'm going to spend 1 stress. I'm going to spend 2 stress. So you would know, okay, I'm not. But now that when you push for resistance and for pushing for effect or whatever, it's random. You might take 3 stress or 2 stress if you roll a really bad roll, and that might push you over into 6, which would then cause the overindulgence. Nate, that's a good observation. Good observation, yeah. Okay. So we still have effect. Effect and consequence are categorized into 4 levels of impact. Effect and consequence, okay, are limited, standard, great, and extreme. That's normal. Harm levels, for example, are an easy way to show this context. Limited, 1. Standard, 2. Great, 3. And extreme harm, level 4, is fatal. Any kind of effect, remember, effect is what you accomplish or what you are doing, or consequence can be conceived in this way, not just numerical ones. When the blue coats are closing in, how intense is it? Are they still searching for the scoundrels? Limited. Or are they pursuing them? Standard. Do the cops have them cornered? Great. Or are the scoundrels actually getting captured? Extreme. A table of example effects and consequences of all kinds, organized by level, is provided on the next page. The crew is negotiating for turf with the billhooks, who are higher tier and more respected, so the threat is great. They might be unreasonable in the bargain. If the effect is reduced, the GM could choose demanding instead of unreasonable. The billhooks insist on a trade that favors them a bit, but nothing beyond reason. Opponents who are closely matched usually have standard effect. If a typical scoundrel fights a typical blue coat, they probably threaten each other with level 2 harm. But you could take a bigger risk to have a greater effect. The player could say they're going all in, fighting their hardest to do harm 3 to the blue coat and risking harm 3 in return. They might go the other way, just a mild tussle, so give and take 1. But if you're not matched, then it could be not right balanced. It could be 3 versus 1 or 4 versus 1. Huh. Well, you know, this is something that a lot of people have asked for before. Like, can you give me an example, like with words, of what these effects look like? So the standard is, 1, 2, 3, 4 ticks, 1, 2, 3, 4 harm, right? Most people cover that pretty thing. But here's just, these sort of adjective ladders. The door, the wagon becomes battered. The wagon becomes damaged. Or the ship becomes battered. The ship becomes damaged. The ship becomes broken. The ship becomes destroyed, right? So it's a way to kind of start to learn to kind of contextualize these scales for people who have a hard time with that. And I'm not saying that this would even be kind of helpful for even someone like me. When a scoundrel wants something and they can't simply achieve it, offer them a devil's bargain to get it by telling them the cost to get what they want or a threat they need to face. You can mark stress, spend coin, lose an item, lose rep, lose status, take heat, suffer harm, take a clock. Offer a cost to skip past troubles without spending a lot of time and attention to the table. Pay the cost and move on. Yeah, you could pry the window open and sneak in. Simple enough, but there's a bit of noise. I'll tick the alert clock. You know what this is? You know what this is? You know what this is? It's a GM move. This is a GM move. This is tell them the consequences and ask. This is Harper kind of, in some ways he's adding back in some of the narrative GM elements that were sort of missing, or rather that kind of got removed from Blades in the Dark, from like a Powered by the Apocalypse situation, because this is literally a version of GM move, right? Tell them the consequences and ask, or tell them the cost and ask. So somebody says something and you're like, well, look, this isn't triggering a move, so I'll just tell you what the cost is and then ask if you want to do it. And I mean, the cost might be nothing, but I might just say, yeah, you can pry the window open and simple enough, but I'll tick the alert clock. And by the way, that's either the cost or a threat. If a player doesn't agree to the cost, they can instead ask the GM if they want to face a threat or undertake some other course of action to get what they want. When you offer a stress cost, you can simply name the number, 1 or 2, or ask the scoundrels to push themselves to do it. Wow. Offer a threat if you want to increase engagement and attention, right? So offer them a cost if you want it to be quick and simple and easy, but you don't want to give them a free handout, right? Yes, this should be a cost. This should matter, but let's just pay it and go on. I don't want to focus on it. On the other hand, we offer them a threat if we want to increase engagement and attention. This is going to lead to a threat roll. We're going to push. We might include teamwork. If a player doesn't want to face the threat, you can ask them to revise the action so they have to try a different way. So you can see here sort of the back and forth. So the GM says, you can steal the documents from Slane's office, but he has good security. You might get caught in the act. So he's saying that's a threat. Maybe I can convince one of his men just to grab it for me. Yeah, you could sway them or command one of them, but he might panic and tell Slane. That's also the threat. That you're behind the threat when it's noticed. Or you could just pay him 2 coin and that'll settle it, which is offering an alternative cost, right? So it's roll or cost, your choice. We know that we can add additional threats by asking for a devil's bargain in the middle of it by +1. The usage of the devil's bargain is similar to the system in Standard Blades. The players get a bonus die in exchange for additional consequences. The difference now is we have to assign, instead of like all or one, we have to assign different dice to it, which is kind of a cool mechanic. I mean, it's an interesting way to use more of your dice. The devil is watching. This form of devil's bargain, unlike the one in Standard Blades, can be used at any time, not just when you make rolls, right? So again, this is giving the GM the ability to essentially make GM moves. It's the GM's job to listen for times when a scoundrel's actions and goals warrant a cost or lead them into the path of a threat. Players can speak for the devil, suggesting bargains for their own scoundrels or other characters, especially in dangerous situations. It might be fun for the players to suggest threats for each other, effectively giving each other bonus dice by raising the stakes. Hey, you're using your lightning hook next to a tank of electroplasm, right? Seems dangerous. Seems like a tank might rupture and explode. My group would have fun with that. On the flip side, a player might propose a cost to a devil's bargain just to quickly resolve it because we're not really interested and we don't want to play it out. Hey, we don't have a lot of time left in the session tonight. Can we just say the blue coats hassle us for a bit? We each take 1 stress and leave us alone. I want to be focused on the main part of the score and try to wrap that up tonight. Popple. That's very cool. No, I like the gather information mechanic. I mean, I don't have to use this, obviously. With this module, the act of gathering information is folded into the usual procedures of play rather than having its own mechanic. When a player wants to know something about the world around them, tell them what's obvious to them, including what they know, what they intuit, and what they suspect, based on their background, character, heritage, etc. If there's more to discover, ask them if they want to know more, and what their character does to find out. Based on their approach, choose either a devil's bargain, aka a cost or a threat, give them a lead, or ask them to start a long-term project. Okay, so, I mean, well, we'll get into this here. Cost. She'll tell you whatever you want to know for the right price. 2 coin will do it. You can beat the tar out of everybody, and he tells you everything, but there are witnesses around. Take 1 heat. Or you can do a threat. You know, the bank is patrolled by elite guards. They might notice that you're snooping around. If the information is especially protected or concealed, the threat of failure might come into play, but use it sparingly. One of the things I loved about the Blades is that it was really basically impossible to fail a gather information roll. It's one of the things I've talked about many times about what I liked about this. Give the player a lead when they're not in a position to gather the information yet, but there's a person, place, or thing in the world that can give them that opportunity. You don't know anything about the permits and licenses that you need to acquire or fake to get started on this scam, but your friend Petra works in the city record archives. She probably knows a lot about this stuff. Okay. These are new teamwork rules. I also love the teamwork. The group action rule was one of my favorite things about Blade. All right, so assist is if you know the old you could take a consequence for somebody. If you're in a position to assist a teammate, protect them, or do something to better set up their action, tell the GM what benefit you're hoping for and say what you're doing to help. Benefits include giving them a bonus to their die roll, improving their effect or their position, reducing the severity of a consequence, or giving them more details when they gather information. The GM has the final say on what benefit you get. Then they either say you accomplish it, tell you what you need to do to get into a position first, or offer you a devil's bargain, pay a cost, or face a threat. As the spirit begins to possess Arcee, I grab her hands in mine and shout over the howling wind and horrible shrieks of the ghost, Arcee, don't lose yourself, I love you! Can that improve her position from desperate to risky? Yeah, cool, but you'll need to push yourself to do it, though. Okay. So again, they'll either tell you what you need to do to get into position first. Oh, well, they will either say you accomplish it, comma, tell you what you need to do to get into position first, or offer you devil's bargain. So you can just say, yep, you do it, or nope, first you have to do this thing, or they'll say, here's the threat, here's the cost. You can also help another player by giving them that edge thing that was from earlier when you double sixes. To cover for someone, describe the action you take so your teammate doesn't have to face a particular threat. The GM either says you accomplish it, tells you what you need to get into position first, or offers you a devil's bargain. Okay. If you're already in danger and making a threat roll, covering for someone adds an additional threat to your roll. And lastly, we have coordinate. Coordinate is 2 ways. Group action and divide and conquer. Ooh, interesting. Okay. When the team coordinates, designate a leader, they can push themselves on behalf of any other character who's acting with the team, in addition to the scoundrels pushing themselves. If everyone faces the same threat, each player rolls to see how much the threat affects their scoundrel individually. So now everybody gets to roll. You're all crawling past the guards to get deeper into the factory. The threat for each of you is 2 ticks on the alert clock. Okay, make your threat rolls and let's see who's facing the consequences. A benefit from a group action is sometimes an increase in scale for the action at hand. If all 4 crew members skirmish as a team, for instance, they're equal in scale to the blue coat squad, so no one faces worse harm as they would fighting alone. Now, the leader can push themselves on behalf of any other character who's acting with the team, but now we're all making a lot more dice rolls. I don't know if I like this. This is like the first thing I actually really don't like. I like the simplicity of the group action, right? Everybody makes their roll, and then we use the best results out of all of us. I guess they felt like maybe that was just too easy to mitigate the risk or cost from a different character who sucks at something, as long as you have one person who's good at it, and then the only consequence is that the leader takes a couple extra points of stress. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I love this, but it seems like it's a lot more complicated. Divide and conquer. If the team faces, but I know people do like to make their checks. If the team faces a variety of threats, the players can play to their own scoundrel strength, each tackling a threat with their own action. Okay, while you prowl past the sentries, I'll finesse the boat into position so you can drop down with the loot. Maybe Ruby can survey to make sure we're clear to escape. Teammates may also be able to assist or cover during a coordinated action depending on the situation. So this is kind of like the setup action. All right. This system combines push and resistance into one roll. Any mechanic which adds 1 die to resistance adds 1 die to push yourself. Any mechanic that adds 1 die to an action roll adds 1 die to the threat roll. When you mark your special armor to push yourself, you don't suffer any stress. A player can still trade position for effect as usual. In that case, offer them a more costly devil's bargain or describe a more dangerous threat. And then a bunch of changes because there's a bunch of stuff that happens for this. And here's just a bunch of threats of Duskwall. And then changes to all the playbooks. Well, I don't know. That's a lot to take in. It's definitely a deep cut. Yeah, I don't know. This is huge. I'm trying to think of when I play Blaze in the Dark. Because I'll be honest with you, okay? So, one of the things that I like about Powered by the Apocalypse, and I've talked about this before, is that when a player rolls a 6-, right, it's called a miss, which is a terrible name. Instead, what it is, and most of the time, is it'll say the GM makes a move. As hard of a move as they'd like, is what they say. And that means that if we're in a situation in the game where I'm thinking to myself, this is not something that the player is going to. The narrative, the story, the players, the group, nobody wants to see this person fail here. Okay. Yes. Let me give you a classic example, right? Like, I don't know, the dragon god is awakening and it's about to rain devastation and ruin. And then like the other characters rush forward and then, they're thrown back. And then you go with your barbarian or something like that, with your mystical axe, you're basically going to leap off of this cliff and you're going to just like, tackle the dragon with your axe and like, go over the edge and end it, but potentially, go into the abyss with it and be destroyed forever. Right. This is a really epic moment. At that point in situation, if I'm not playing D&D, even if I am playing D&D, this is why people cheat and fudge all the time. You've been playing for maybe months, maybe years or something like that. And it's just this epic moment. And then this character maybe this character started off as like this selfish barbarian who only cared about money and women and wine. And now they're literally, leaping to sacrifice themselves potentially to end this threat. They've learned about a bigger self anyway. In a situation like that, when someone rolls low and then you go, I guess you miss, you miss, the dragon destroys the world, and I guess that's it. Like, that is not a situation I ever want to be in if I'm playing that kind of game. What I'm not, so this is where Harper's mind's at. I'm not questioning whether you're going to succeed or not. The barbarian is willing to do this. The barbarian is going to stop. Right? The barbarian is going to stop this dragon. I could include the threat of failure, but that's not something that. This is obviously a desperate action, right? Using this new language. And the threat isn't that you're going to fail. The threat is that your soul is consumed into the abyss with the dragon. And it's a desperate roll. So you're going to roll 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, soul consumed. And if you roll 6, you manage to, just drop the axe into its chest and it falls back into the abyss and you don't go die with it. But what's not at stake here is whether or not you're going to fail and that, you're going to slip on a banana peel, mythic epic banana peel, right? Like, so what I always loved about Powered by the Apocalypse is that when the player does roll a 6-, I, the GM, get to make as hard of a move as I would like. So if we're doing that in Powered by the Apocalypse and you describe this awesome heroic action, If we're playing D&D, let's be clear, by the way. We're playing D&D, you do this amazing action, and then you roll a 3, and I go, you miss. I don't know. The dragon destroys the world. Or, more likely, because we're playing D&D, these days, it'd be like, you miss, but it disrupts the dragon a little bit, and now the world doesn't end this round. It's going to end next round. So you'll have another chance to do it. Right? Some bullshit. Removing any threat of the stakes. Like, it's all performative art, anyways. So in D&D, you roll low, you miss. In Powered by the Apocalypse, if a player rolls a 6-, I get to make as hard of a move as I like. And I basically say, you leap into the air, and you're bringing your axe down. And now I can make as hard of a move as I like, and I'm going to offer you an opportunity. I'm going to offer you something with a cost. I'm going to say, you realize that the axe strike isn't enough. You need to put your whole body into it. You can succeed, but if you do, your character will be dead, consumed by the abyss. Do you make that choice? And now the player can make that choice, but I put the emphasis back onto them, and if they really wanted this to succeed, they can do that. That's with them rolling a miss. So I love that in Powered by the Apocalypse. Blades in the Dark did not technically have that. If someone rolled a 1, 2, or a 3, you failed, and there was a consequence. There was no idea of this GM move as hard as you like, which could include offering the player the ability to succeed at a cost. Not really. I mean, the implication was there because technically Fortune in the Dark is a Powered by the Apocalypse because it derives from that fundamental principle. But this is really tying back into that idea, which is that the scoundrel, by default, is assumed to succeed. What we're really rolling for is to see, do you avoid the threat, do you mitigate the threat, or does the full force of the threat kind of come to bear? It's both the same thing and a fundamentally different way of viewing the game. And what I think it will do to your game is probably, I don't know. I think it would. I don't want to say that it'll make the game more epic. It'll just make the scoundrels seem more competent. Right? They might get into trouble a lot, and they might think, but they'll never like flub it. I mean, the game does still include option of the threat of failure as one of the threats that you might face, but it does talk about using it sparingly and really saving it for unique situations that would be really difficult. But if it's like normal crime time scoundrel and Duskwall stuff, the threat of them failing should not really be something that we're dealing with. Yeah, I don't know. That's a lot to take in.